Welcome to another mega exciting kingscrusher radio show. So this week I thought for a change we can go back to have a look at some great games of Garry Kasparov, in fact. So he's played some absolutely fantastic games in his career, and there are major events on, of course, to another at the moment, which have interesting games all the time, but you know, sometimes if you go back in time, there's beautiful games in the past. Now I'd like to draw your attention to three very interesting games of Garry Kasparov in this particular radio show tonight. So to me, he's one of the greatest ever, world chess champions. At the top, of the rating list for considerable time. In fact, when he retired from chess, he was still, at the top of the rating list. He's one of the very few world champions who actually achieved that, as well as great dominance over his rivals. So, so this game, I'll actually first is in Tbilisi, 1976. Putin was white, and I probably got the pronunciation wrong for that. Let me just see on chessgames.com if there's a pronunciation. No, okay, you have to go with that. So Putin is an Armenian grandmaster. He got the GM title in 1984 actually. So that's 8 years after this game. Let's have a look at this game. So I'm going to add, by the way, a kibitza. And you might be wondering if I sound a bit funny. It's because we're having like the hottest day ever here in the UK. That might be affecting my brain slightly. It's certainly affected my appetite for playing chess today. But anyway, let's try and have a look at these three games. It's slightly cooler than earlier anyway. So d4 from the Putin. We see Kasparov playing a King's Indian defense, and here's one of him and Fischer were actually two of my greatest influences to play the King's Indian defense. And I think I missed the meeting where you were supposed to change to some boring opening like the Slav defense or Grunfeld. I continued playing the King's Indian defense at club level, and still playing now actually, and I think a lot of people do because it's a fun opening. There's this big mismatch between what club players like to play and super GMs, but it's a fun opening, letting white have that center. And we see in this game the Simish variation f3. So it's a fairly clear cut idea that white's gonna sometimes play like this and exchange off this and castle queenside, and that sort of thing is one basic plan. But black has pretty standard routines which are well worked out here, and Kasparov uses one of them, which is basically you're playing like this sometimes with black. Kasparov goes for this plan with knight c6. So we have bishop e3 and now a6. So the idea is to threaten potential queenside counterplay. We have queen d2, so white set up that battery ready if black castles to try and exchange off the bishop here, and then maybe you can continue with h4 later or something, try and peel open the h file. But at the moment Kasparov is not entirely keen to castle here, even though that's the main move. In fact, the main move is actually castling. Delays it for a bit, rook b8, which is a little bit of a sideline move actually. There are about 38 games compared to hundreds of just castling. Now white plays, instead of knight ge2, plays rook b1. So already with this position, this game's quite kind of unique. It becomes unique actually after rook b1. Fairly unique position. Not too many great games, but it's transposing back now. After castling, knight ge2 would transpose back into the main beaten paths, but white plays b4. Okay, so white's played slightly unusually, not finishing development, not having a massive urgency to castle, and expanding on the queen side rapidly. And you might think, some players, this might take players by surprise, because after all, aren't there concerns now about this queenside expansion? Well, black plays e5, and after d5, without the knight being here already to contest that d4 square, instead of the knight going back, lo and behold, Kasparov plays knight d4, and things get really interesting. So the only major sin you might consider that white hasn't listened to beginners rules, and he hasn't rapidly castled, so his king's still in the center, right? But how as playing black, this is already an energetic move, knight d4, of course, but what if the knight's challenged? Now if this is taken and white's too greedy, then bang, wallop, knight takes e4, hitting the queen. Now we can pin the queen to the king, end of game. Now that's not going to happen. White's going to just challenge this knight. So now, should Kasparov just take on e2, or should he do something else? In fact, he played c5 here, and things really get quite exciting now. First of all, it's a bad idea if white takes on d4 now. This would be a fantastic pawn to have there, and probably winning for black, actually. This sort of position, without the dart square bishop, this is just much better for black. So forget that. White uses his en passant capability, takes the pawn, en passant, b takes, and now takes the knight. Isn't this a free pawn? Well, the thing is, the king is still in the center, and in fact, there's potentially loose pieces as well hanging around. But how to actually prove any liabilities of white in this position? Well, rook e8 faces that king directly. We see bishop e2 shielding the king, so no problem, right? Well, there's a little bit of a problem, actually, and things get really crazy now. I mean, seriously, this makes this game magnificent, what we're about to see now. So black has sacrificed the pawn to reach this position, yeah? If you count the pawns, white's got an extra pawn. And now, isn't white just ready to castle next? That's the threat. White's just going to castle and then be a pawn up. So black has to react quickly here to try and exploit this situation, if there's something to exploit. So let's start playing guess the move now, shall we? So black to play, what would you play with black? To those watching on stream, if I give you 20 seconds here, black to play, what would you consider a good move in this position? So we've got bishop e2 being played. So bishop e2, this is position after bishop e2. Okay, our black plays c5 here, very energetic on the b file, right? Now, if bishop takes, that's no good. We're losing that dark square bishop. That's usually not a good thing to do, because remember, all the pawns are on light squares. This bishop's going to be a monster. So we have b takes, actually, and the rooks are looking at each other, saying, "What are you doing there? What are you doing there?" But this one's protected by the knight, so is there a problem? Does black just want to take on b1? If black takes on b1, knight takes. This is actually, if we reach this position, it's actually okay, technically, at least for white. Even though it might be a slightly tricky position to play, it should be okay for white. White can actually play like this, and should be okay with c5 to come to block that diagonal. Should be okay, right? So does black want to take on b1? Things get intriguing here. I mean, really intriguing, because it looks as though everything's fortified. The king is shielded on e1 by the bishop. All it needs is one more move to castle. The rook's protected by the knight, yeah? Is there any recipe for disaster here? Any at all? I mean, surely it looks fairly solid. Is this solid or is it not solid? Is it? Kasparov seems to offer good questions for this setup, actually, with this next move, which actually engineers like as well. So if I say black to play here, is there any interesting move you might consider in this position? Black to play here. So 20 seconds to chew on this one. Okay. Some of you on stream are excited by this position. One or two of you, it seems. This is an exciting move. Kasparov plays an amazing forcing move here. Knight takes e4. So there's no time to be like for taking here because we'll just take the queen, right? There aren't too many options, right? If knight takes, then the rook's hanging. Rook takes b1. That's no good. So white takes this. There's not too many options. And now we get queen h4 check. Probably best for white is to play king f1 apparently. This might be one of the better moves to play king f1 or bishop f2. But in the game actually white played g3. This might not be the best because it potentially exposes this rook on this diagonal, because now rook takes b1 drags the knight away from e4. But white's idea is not to play knight takes, which would be actually not clever, because actually even though it's not check here, both of these pieces are forked, and if white tries to castle, well, then the bishop's also attacked as well, by the way. So this position is not good. If bishop takes, then we can take on h1, and this is actually not at all good for white. It's actually ending up getting mated or losing his queen, or both. So that's not a good line either. So this is interesting. White plays, in fact, king f2, which is probably the only move. Yeah, it's really the only move, because just to recap, yeah, queen takes e4 is basically devastation itself. It's on these three pieces. It's devastating here. It's really devastating. Whatever white does here, it's like it's bad. You know, if rook f1, bishop takes d4, and then, you know, if I don't know, knight here, we can just like take here. You know, we're on e2. It's devastating. So basically, the idea was actually king f2. Now, king f2. So the queen's being attacked. So there's no time to take the rook, so we can lose the queen, right? There's no real compensation there. We have, though, another brilliant move in this position, which had to be foreseen by Kasparov to evaluate this as better for him. Because if the queen humbly, you know, goes back here, then just rook takes b1 and white's just winning. But there is a move for black. There is a resource in this position, believe it or not, that black has here. So this is a crazy game. Black to play here. What would you play in this position? Any ideas? Now, it's not, bishop takes d4 is not a good idea, by the way, even though it's check, because this position is still this problem that two pieces are attacked. And if here, we can just take there and take with the knight, be winning. for white as a minimum. So it's not bishop takes d4 check. Now there's another brilliant move here. It's rook b2. I mean, this is incredible stuff. Trying to deflect the queen away from d4, and that will be with check. So after rook b2, the ball is back in white's court with difficult decisions to make. So let's examine rook take. If queen takes, bishop takes d4 check, and in fact here bishop takes c3 check, queen takes e4, and lo and behold we've got another double attack here, which is crushing. This is just winning for black. A rook up. So fascinating that rook b2, that would be a disaster on queen takes b2. So white plays g takes h4. We have basically an exchange of queens tactically. Bishop takes, king takes, and yeah, black's slightly better here. It's not like massively winning like with a checkmate or something. He's just slightly better now after all that. The immediate threat is rook c2 if black's given another move to try and, you know, put more pressure on e4. So we see king e3, rook c2, king d3, trying to rescue the situation with his king. And here, in fact, note also, by the way, that black is currently the exchange up, but if white tries to preserve being the exchange up with rook b2, then this position is all of a sudden, this is not entirely good, because the king can actually create this kind of pawn armada in the center with king d4 and stuff like that to follow. Example here, king d4, c5, and actually white's better, even though white's the exchange down. These pawns are pretty strong. In fact, this one's hit. We can even get rid of the rooks. These pawns are two connected pass pawns supported by the king. So Kasparov, he's aware of the danger here that this could be quite dynamic for white potentially. He doesn't play rook b2, so again the game takes another twist. He plays rook takes c3, gives back the exchange just to have potentially a small advantage here structurally. So white's structure is just worse than black's. We've got all the pawn islands here, 1 2 3 4 double pawns there. Black's got only, you know, 3 pawn islands compared to 4, but with e4 loose, and that's targeted. Bishop d3, bishop b7, rook e1, and white might be considering e5 here to relieve some pressure, but this is blocked. So by blocking, and this squares, we can play later f5. So we have a4, f5 now, and it's very difficult for white. He's losing this center pawn, and this is now a fast f pawn. So the game continues like this. White tries to block this f pawn, f2, and now there's another technical problem here, how to make progress in this position, but it's solving another great move in this position. So black to play here. How do you try and liberate this passed pawn? Black to play. Any ideas? Okay, I'm just going to show you. It's not a major tactic actually. Bishop g4, just trying to deflect the bishop away from f1. Now if bishop f1, then rook e1. So white tries to hold on with bishop d3, but now just rook e1 is pretty strong. We have rook f7 trying to stop the pawn like that. but bishop f5 gets in the way. By the way, I don't think there was too much there anyway apart from that. So again, f1 is on the cards. a5. Now f1 here is only fractionally better for black actually because of this pawn here. Again, Kasparov is looking at the dynamism all the time at the opponent. He's not leaving this to chance. This position is not massively better for black, bishop up. No, what he does do is, in fact, minimize the opponent's dynamism. Bishop takes d3. Much more accurate. So if takes, we get a rook up. So we have now rook takes f2. But now the situation of the bishop and rook is resolved with the final move, rook f1, just hitting that rook with the bishop. And this is fine. This pawn is not winning. It's too far away. And the bishop's always got g2, by the way, anyway. So if rook takes a6, it's not going too far. We can even take here, by the way. And then block on d5. So, yeah. That was the final position. So I thought this is a great Kasparov game, and I hope you can forgive me showing you this game instead of a game which might be less interesting, which is current or whatever. Life is too short. Yeah, there's some good games in the past, and I thought this is a pretty brilliant game. And when you delve into the games again, you sometimes see new things, like you would see a film. You might have seen a film several times, but you pick up new nuances which you might not have seen before. I mean, as a player, I also think as players we are evolving, right? We hope. So if we revisit a game we've already seen before and pick up new nuances, hopefully we're also in a better position to do that. If we were, say, stronger than the year before, I mean, hopefully we can pick up some new stuff from an old game. I don't know how many of you know this game intimately already. I don't know. It seemed to be... I've probably seen this game before myself at some point, but I think it was a good revision. What do you think? It was a good revision of I think not just dynamic play, it's also squashing the dynamism at every turn of the opponent. It was clever play and practical because it was not letting the opponent have dynamic play as well. Yeah. So it features a combination, but it's careful. It's carefully done. And he just got a small but clear advantage in trying to shut down the opponent's dynamic possibilities as well. So let's have a look at another game now. Okay. So this is one of three. So I found 3 interesting games to check out. Let's go to the second one. So his opponent here was Magaramov, Elmer Magaramov, who was born in Azerbaijan. That's where Kasparov's from. He was winner of the Andorra Open in 1990, placed second in the last USSR Championship in 1991, winner of the Bad Warsafen in 1993, winner of the UAE Open in Dubai 2005, 6 and 7, first place in Dubai August 2009. Okay, so seems to be a player with achievements. So let's have a look at this game. So played in Baku 1977, knight f3, Kasparov plays knight f6, we see d4, e6, c4, d5, knight c3, bishop e7. It seems fairly classical stuff. So Kasparov playing rather classically. This is the Tartakower variation. Tartko defense, survey Tartko. So trying to resolve this issue of the c8 bishop. We have queen b3, bishop b7. This is pretty standard stuff, all pretty standard stuff. C takes. So white's idea in taking on f6, so trying to lock down this bishop behind its own pawn for a moment. Rook d1. Actually, rook d1 is the most popular move again. Now, quite often rook e8 is played here. In this game, we see c5 in this position. So Kasparov is actually the one going theoretically off the rails with c5. It's not meant to be played here. Usually, the most popular continuation is rook e8. And there's at least 75 key games after this kind of thing, which looks kind of dry, but c5 is later prepared at some point like this. A bit drier than the game continuation, which is this immediate c5 for Kasparov here. Very rare, very rare. Immediate c5. In fact, what do the engines think? The engines, yeah, okay, forget what the engines think for a moment. So d takes c5. Now the point is here, d5 is hit hard. Now if b takes, yeah, white just takes the bishop anyway, by the way. It's not about the d5 pawn, white just takes that bishop. So the point is this temporary pawn sack, knight bd7. And now it's kind of scary to take on d5. White plays instead c6. If he takes on d5, knight takes c5, black's going to be better, hitting the queen. This position is actually just better for black. Even though black's a pawn down, there's too much pressure on white here. White can't even easily castle. Too much pressure bearing down. This position is just nice for black. So forget that. White wants to be able to castle without too much hassle. He plays c6. We have bishop takes c6, and he creates a nice blockade on d4. So it's still keeping this bishop locked in by its own pawn. Bishop takes, rook takes. We have knight c5 now, hitting the queen, and this knight can swing round to e6, which it does now. The rook moves back, and really energetic play now. I mean, which is interesting actually. It's just reminded me of something. So this next move, guess what black plays in this position? So black's play here, and it reminds me of this question about favourite moves actually posed recently on Reddit actually. And I've found when looking at my past games, some of the emotional moves seem to be connected with pawn moves, liberating pawn moves. I found at least 3 or 4 examples where, because I think when you're in a one-day game, sometimes you're imprisoned by your own pawn structure or the opponent's positional play, and it's often the little pawn moves that liberate your position. And for me, I look back, and some of those have quite a strong emotional connections in my memory still, that I played these like liberating pawn moves, and somehow I'm emotionally connected to them more than other events of the game, which I found surprising. So black's play here has a liberating pawn move anyway, which is d4. It liberates this bishop. This bishop is no longer a prisoner, but potentially a heroic piece. So we have e takes d4, and the point is the king's still in the center, right? So we've also weakened f4 because we've uprooted white's defense of f4. So rook e8 now. And we've got horrible threats all of a sudden, like knight f4 check with the king still in the center. So white is already in an emergency situation. He's in a dangerous looking position already. And the funny thing is, I mean, this is just weird, but you think this c5, this is a good advert for c5, right? But it's the only game in Livebook with that quick c5. I don't know why. Maybe it was Kasparov very, very young, and I don't know, maybe it wasn't taken that seriously. But as far as I can tell, engines don't mind black's play at all so far, this pawn sack. So white plays f3, and now there's a crushing move in this position. So Kasparov to play, black to play. What would you play in this position? So again, we've got another nice easy target of a king in the centre, which makes for great entertainment when going over these games, when the king is still stuck in the centre. So what would you play in this position with black? Black's play. So white's just played f3. Okay, not knight takes d4 check, because king f2, and actually white's okay really. White's nearly okay, maybe not quite, and not knight f4 check, because again king f2 and white's nearly okay, but black's better. But white should be nearly okay apparently. No, there's a real crusher actually in bishop takes f3. The point is, if black wanted check, there's annoyingly g3 as a technicality. So by playing bishop takes f3, we're rupturing this g3 possibility. It's now if queen takes, then we just win the queen with the check, and we're hitting the queen. We're going to win the queen. We have g takes f3, but now this queen h4 is more effective. Now if king e2, then it's mate in one, knight f4 double check and mate. That's not a good idea. So we have rook f2 out of necessity. Knight takes d4 check. Now if the king goes to d2, then I think we can just take the rook simply, or there's actually a mate in 8 here with queen f4 check anyway. So that's not really too clever. The white king is just going to get mated here. So sorry, that was the line with king d3, right? So basically, white plays bishop e2. So we have knight takes f3 now. So both of these pieces are pinned. The king's only got f1. Check. Only rook g2. Knight h4 now. White has to defend. And now rook a8 hitting the queen. Queen e1. And now another crushing move. This is like one of the top engine moves as well. Black's playing crush here. Black's play. What would you play in this position? It's another great guess the move. So there's two useful pins in the position, right? At least two. There's this one and this one. But how do we use both pins with crushing effect here? Any ideas? Okay, it's rook d3. So the idea is like rook f3 check or knight f3. The f3 square is much more supported now. Queen f2. Now rook f3 is ruled out by that because white could just take that and nearly be okay. No, but here we have knight f3. And this is really quite a vicious position, to say the least, after knight f3. It's like, okay, white's like running out of moves, it seems. He plays rook h1, but now rook d e3. So now if the bishop moves out, then rook e1 is mating. You know, if bishop c4, then rook e1 is actually well, no, not mating. Pardon me. Rook e1 is just crushing. It's just crushing. So we have the rook actually going back to g1. Yeah. What else? Because, you know, bishop takes f3. We just pin the queen. Yeah. So the rook goes back rather helplessly. But now, first of all, he takes his king off this g file. So that's not going to be with check if it ever did happen. And again, white's just waiting around with rook h1. But it is a kind of zugzwang position. Kasparov now just plays b5, saying, you know, if you move the knight, e2 is going to drop. You know, so actually white resigned here. White resigned. If knight takes b5, rook takes e2 is crushing this position here, because we're winning g2 as well. So after b5, it's kind of helpless. If a3, maybe just a5 is possible. And what is white doing? Say this. Then we can just take here. So with b4 coming, what does white do? He has to give up material. If queen g3 ever, threatening mate, then there's knight d2 check, winning the queen. So if b4, there's rook takes c3 as mentioned. So this is just hopeless. Nothing can move in this position. So yeah, white actually kind of resigned after b5. I mean, if you look, it's really impressive visually, isn't it? The doubled rooks, the pin, the knight on f3. Should there be any resources to save white? Not really, you'd think. Just from the visuals here that we have. But yeah, it's crushing. It really is. Okay, so yeah, another crushing game. But it's Kasparov that made the kind of innovation in this game with that early c5. And for some reason, yeah, it hasn't been chased up by that many master games. So this is an aggressive way of playing the Tartakower defense. At least for us in Blitz, we should check this out. This quick c5 idea in the Tartakower. Because yeah, he accelerated his bishop being aggressive. He opened up the opponent's king. So, you know, quite an aggressively played Tartakower defense example. Hope you got something from that. So let's go on to my third game now. You like that one, I hope. Yeah. So my third game that I'd like to show you tonight is Kasparov playing against Pigusov. Evengi Pigusov. I haven't got a pronunciation link. I'm just reading it how it's kind of looks. Pigusov. Okay, so Riga 1977. Kasparov was white. He plays d4. We have d5. Knight f3, knight f6, c4, e6. Okay, looks fairly standard stuff so far in Queen's Gambit declined territory. It's all fairly standard, well worked out stuff so far. Quite often h3 is played here. This is another popular move. Quite often knight e4 is played here. But in this game, knight g6 was played. Knight e4 simplifies, usually, like this, for example, where there's loads of games from this position and it's thought to be okay, equal-ish. But no, black here though plays knight g6 instead, slightly rarer, knight g6. Okay. Now we have knight e5. So actually, I can't help but think of Tartko again. You know, we just had a Tartko defense, but Tartko was one of his famous witty quotations. He said, when you get a knight on e5, the attack plays itself. So there's a knight on e5 here, and actually there's a bit of logic and ideas behind this, which is shown here with this knight on e5 now. Okay, the bishop's challenged. Kasparov takes that bishop and now plays f4. So he's got this kind of Pillsbury bind with this knight on e5. And what does black do to free himself in this position? If f6, we're just going to take on g6 here and not worry about anything. Nothing to worry about, right? So we've got this major monster knight on e5 now. So this should be a bit of fun now with this position. A bit of fun to be had here. Now, a kind of liberating move for white's pieces, even though he's already in a great position. Plays e4 because he's trying to tear open like this diagonal. You know, sometimes this diagonal will be useful. So we have knight takes, f takes, which opens up the rook. Now, if d takes, this is just a massive position after knight takes e4 with knight d6 coming in. That would be horrible for black. So black tries to keep solid in inverted commas. Bishop e6. We have e takes, bishop takes. Now knight takes, bishop f5, holding that c8 square, stopping black challenge the queen. So it's a nice pawn chain. It's a nice little advantage here for white. Queen b4 hits the pawn. That's protected. h6. If black plays g6, I think we just keep the bishop eyeing c8 with a move like this with a nice advantage. So we have h6, and now rook f3 because, sorry, not rook f3. No, that might be a good move, rook f3, to sort of build up on f7 here. We see queen f2, rook e7, and we do get potential pressure now with rook d3 with the idea of rook f3 now, treble on f7. But there's another thought here, not just rook f3 is nifty. First kick the queen, rook b3, and now, in fact, rook g3 with an idea of queen d2, for example, hitting h6. We have knight e6. Queen e3, same idea. Either d2 or h or e3 will do. They hold the pawn and they hit the pawn. So black unpins the g7 pawn. h3. Queen b4, putting more pressure on d4 here. White doesn't want to just play bishop takes. That will be not such a gigantic advantage, although it is still better for white. White plays rook g4 holding d4 and offers this b2 pawn, which black takes. King h2. So black's been a bit greedy there. Bishop d3. But now things get very interesting. Black has to play very precisely here. Perhaps queen f8 is to be considered. But what he plays is actually queen e7. And all of a sudden, because he didn't play queen f8, there's a fantastic resource available for white in this position. White's play, brilliant move here. White's play. Well, what would you play in this position with white? So you want to punish black for that greedy pawn they've just stolen from you. Yeah? You want to punish black's king, ideally. So white's play, but how would you do that in this position? Any ideas? Yeah, rook f6 is possible here. Because we're still IH6, right? We're threatening things like... If G takes, it's just mate in 1. That's just checkmate. And we're threatening actually queen takes h6 or rook takes. Queen h6 is actually even more precise, because then there's queen h7 and queen h8 after. So black tries to defend with knight g5. Does this defend the position? Does it? Is black all of a sudden defending? Okay, white's play here. What does white play in this position? Any ideas? Okay, any ideas? This particular position, we can break through, not h4, because then actually black can play just g takes, apparently. If takes here, f takes, and where's the attack? It's gone. No, 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 we can't play h4. No, rook takes g5. So the point is, if takes here, rook h5 is mating, so we're taking on h6, and it's like a forced mate this position because there's queen g3 check now. If f5, well, we got queen g5 check, queen takes f5, and this is mating, for example. That's mating all lines. So okay, rook takes g5. We have so I mentioned g takes just fails miserably, yeah, to rook h5. So we have h takes g5, queen takes g5, and now the threat is actually check, and checkmate. The threat is a mate in 3 with either here or here, starting that mate in 3. Black tries to evacuate now, but still queen h4 here, threatening the mate in 2, queen h7, queen h8, checkmate. So the king can't escape here because of queen h8, checkmate. If takes here, doesn't help, check and then mate. So we see in this position probably tenacious. The engine suggestion is queen d8, but even this we have check, taking, and this is much better for white, this position. Why? There's still numerous threats like rook d6 and queen h4. What does black play here? Say this, e6, rook g6. We're going to be kind of winning the queen if nothing else. This is just crushing this position. If here, queen g7, queen e5. The king's not actually escaping. It's just getting mated in all variations. So that's the technical defense. It still fails. Even the utmost engine defense fails in this position. After this queen h4, apparently, you know, queen e8 is one of the top defenses. It just fails. But queen a3 was played. And you know, Kasparov played a really strong move, rook f3, but there might even be stronger here in check. It's such a strong position. This might be even stronger way of playing things. This position here after bishop b5 is apparently the strongest way of playing it. But anyway, Kasparov played another really strong move, which is rook f3, threatening bishop h7 check to pick up the queen. Now, okay, so this position, if the queen dares to get away, then this is again like really dangerous stuff, like this. Well, we can pick up the rook and be a bishop up. So actually in this position we see we see g6. Black offers this discovered attack on the queen. That's taken because the idea was queen takes f3 to try and get 2 rooks for the queen. Okay, now so say Kasparov did take the queen here. Even this position is good for white though. This position here is good for white. It's still very good for white. It's actually a very bad state of affairs for black. But even stronger is check, because that pins that pawn to the rook. And now just taking on f3. That's end of game. Black resigns here. It's enough. So in this game it seems, you know, black not playing knight e4 seemed to give white a kind of Pillsbury bind, which was actually quite crushing. When you get that knight on e5, it can turn out to be really crushing, because if you note what happened after that was this f-file pressure was quite intense. And Kasparov, okay, he like lost the pawn on the queen side or sacked it. It will take a computer to defend that after. White just smashed his way through after, because also the aggressive pawn chain helps the attacking player. But that Pillsbury bind has a few aspects to it to consider. You know, the aggressive pawn structure, the f-file dynamic pressure. It just makes it easier for the attacking player. So that goes back to Tartako's quotation, you know, knight on e5 plays itself. But even when that knight goes, you know, the structure is often great for the attacking player to enjoy the position. You know, f-file pressure, relentless attacking possibilities, it seems. So that was a nice attacking game, I thought. If you want to see how taking a pawn and getting away with it, if you're a fan of Korchnoi or something, could black have actually got away with this pawn nab earlier? What was the pawn nab? It was around here. So I mentioned briefly, it was mentioned queen f8 instead. I think the idea is to support h6. If rook f6, then we can just take that. So it stops rook f6 at least. Yes, it would be more challenging, but even so, white, because of this pawn chain, enjoys more space. It's a long time to come for these pawns to do anything. So we can start making threats here, like queen f3. Say black does nothing much. And again, rook f6 will emerge as a threat. You know, rook f6 will re-emerge potentially as a threat. I'm just giving you a bad example of black's play. You know, you could get hacks like this instead, potentially. No, it's, I mean, basically, I think the key thing to remember here is this transition of the Pillsbury bind. And I've seen this in other master games as well recently. You can transition this position with this knight on e5 into a very favourable, basically it's a very favourable attacking structure. We've got aggressive pawn chain and f-file pressure on a backward pawn. It's just very difficult to defend sometimes this sort of position if you're looking out then for the attacking resources that are available, like Kasparov is always. So that was a good position, even if he loses b2 as in the game. So anyway, I hope you got something from these game examples. So yeah, I mean, it's very dynamic, aggressive play, and I think by revisiting these Kasparov games, you can learn a lot of stuff about how attacks work. You know, the mechanics of attacking chess. etc. Okay, so I'm going to go now because it's really hot, etc. But if you did like any bits of this, yeah, please do like the video and comments or questions on YouTube. Okay, thanks very much. Have a nice week. Okay, see you then. See you next week. Might continue this Kasparov thing next week on other games. Okay.